Welcome back to the show. I have got my good buddy and my former teacher buddy, Brian Snider, with us today. Welcome to the show, Brian.
I am so happy to be here, Megan. Always a great time spending time with you. So looking
Oh
forward to
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. One of the things I've been doing a lot lately because I've done a lot of interviews on the show. I think it's so cool to share instead of just having somebody say, "Hey, like what's your bio?" I think I've been having a lot of fun telling people how we met. So I'll let you share that. Like how do we know each other, Brian?
Yeah,
Share
I
with
think
our
it's
audience.
people. I don't. We're grouped into this category, Megan, where like I guess if you're a teacher and you're doing something else, like then you just people have to connect you with every other teacher they know. I feel like so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at family mastermind and stuff. It was my first time being at the event and stuff, but I had like five people just tell me like, "Oh man, you need to meet Megan Huber," and I was like, "Okay, yeah." Well, somebody introduced me and stuff, but that's exactly it. I just feel like, "Oh, you're a teacher. She was a teacher. You guys need to talk sometime and stuff like that."
Yeah.
So even though we're former teachers, like I feel like we just like right away we hit it off the bat of just like feel like we have a lot of stuff in common. Our personalities are pretty
Yes.
similar. Feel like we operate mindset wise pretty similar too. So yeah, it was a good connection.
Yeah. And if anybody doesn't know what the Family Mastermind is, Brian and I are both a member of the Family Mastermind, and it is a real estate investing mastermind. I think there's like 250 plus people in it, real estate investors and all types of service providers who support real estate investing companies, and then a lot of education companies, which is why I'm in there. I think that's probably one of the reasons why you're there as well. So that's what Family Mastermind is. It's so funny that you just said, we have a similar personality. I can't remember the guy's name, but it was our most recent event. A guy came up to me and he said, he was like, "Are you an introvert?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can you tell?" And if people don't know this too, like Brian, you know this, I MC the events. Like I am talking a lot, I'm on the stage a lot. And I was like, "What gave it away?" He said, he goes, "Well, I just have been watching you and I can tell when you come off stage, you're totally an introvert." And I was like, "Yeah, are you?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "That's how we can spot each other, because if you kind of have that similar personality, you just know
Yeah,
certain behaviors and tendencies that the other person has. But I'll tell you, we won't shut up if you can get us to talk about a topic we love."
that's right. That's the way it
So
is. So, but
hopefully I can
you got to
get
know
you to
when to
talk
turn it
more.
on and when to turn it off. Actually, you and I were talking before this, and it's kind of like just catching up, just casual conversation. Then once that's like hit record, it's like, all right, we both perk up a little bit. We're like, all right, we got to be on. We're good to
Yeah.
go. So,
Here we go. Okay. Well, hopefully I can get you to talk about what you love to talk about today. So let's dive in. I don't know your whole story. I know bits and pieces because we've only talked a few times over the last like 9, 10 months. But what I love about your story is that we both were teachers. You were a math teacher. I was a business teacher. We know how much money we were making. We know like the mentality of like being an employee and being a teacher. And you have a successful real estate business, and you're also the COO of a very, very large, very prominent, also real estate investing mastermind. So can you kind of take us back to when the teacher years were coming to a close? And I believe you started the real estate investing business first. You invested in like 200 plus properties. What was it that like flipped in your mind that caused you to go from I'm a teacher, and maybe you thought you were going to do that the rest of your life? What, like, why start real estate investing? Like, let's start there.
yeah. For me, it was like typical. I don't know. Basically graduated to become a teacher, so started being a teacher. That just the natural path is like, okay, now I have to become a principal. Then I'll be
That was what I was
superintendent.
going to
Like,
do.
yeah. Like just if there's a level to get to, like I'm gonna get to that level. Like I always just want to
Yes.
level up. That's just who I am and stuff, and gravitate towards leadership positions and things. But so I taught my goal was always like, hey, I want to teach for to be a good principal because I thought that was my path. I want to teach for 10 years. I want to be in the classroom for 10 years, understand what they're going through and stuff like that. That will make me a better principal. That was my thought. Probably not. I was probably wrong on that, but anyway, that was my thought. So do my 10 years of teaching, working on my master's, become a principal, and finish that. Once I like actually start doing my internship, my principal internship, I'm like, this is terrible. This is the worst job in the world.
Really?
Who would want
Really?
to be a principal? So does not fit my personality. Maybe this is I don't know, but like if you're a principal, basically every decision you make, half the people like it and half the people don't.
It's
That doesn't
true.
I need people to like me. I need people to like for the most part like me anyway and stuff like that. So it just didn't fit my personality. And at that point I was I had hit all my goals as a teacher. Um it's kind of funny, like in our school district, like, they started doing all the standardized testing, so you could actually measure yourself and your students' growth and things like that. And my school district at the time, I think basically, they would grade out your system, or grade out your school with grade levels for basically over the last 3 years, and the teachers are measured on growth of their students. And the teachers in our district, basically there was everything was red and orange, which were like the two worst categories, except for a bright green one on sixth grade math, which was mine, and stuff like that. So I was doing very well. I accomplished all my goals. Like my students were performing and things like that. But I realized, like, hey, being a principal is not for me. It's not what I want to do at
Mm,
all. So at
mm,
that time, actually, I had just moved to Indianapolis and connected with my buddy Brett Snodgrass through church, through we're former basketball players, going to church together and stuff like that. We're in a small group together at church, and basically just kind of connected and realized he was doing this real estate investing thing. And I really had no idea what he was doing, didn't understand it, didn't know at all what he was doing. No, but none of our friend group really knew what he was doing or anything, but I just knew he was in real estate in some way. So we went out for a beer one day, and I told him, like, hey, I think I'm going to teach for one more year and be done. He was like, why don't you just come work for me? And started that. That was basically it. So real estate. So I did not start a real estate investing company. I just joined my buddy Brett, and he was already the investing business. It was there. He was always doing a lot of deals, and it was kind of running. And he and I made a pretty good team of, like, I have a lot of visionary tendencies, but I'm a really good number two. Like, I can lead certain things, but I'm pretty good at, like, taking other people's goals and, like, helping them reach those goals. That's what I
yeah.
enjoy doing. Maybe that's, we do that as teachers all the time and stuff. But so I teamed up with Brett and started working with him. And I went to, knowing nothing about real estate or anything like that, started kind of came in and do some marketing stuff for him. And then all of a sudden I started doing, I started taking over the sales of his company. So I was selling all of our properties, took over operations. Then eventually I moved into that CEO role, and he moved into the owner's box, and I was running the company for him. At that time I was working with Sharper Business Solutions and Gary Harper. They were our business coaches, and with my teaching background, they're like, our curriculum pretty well. Like, would you like to be one of our coaches? So at that time, I started, like, coaching other real estate investing businesses and things like that, traveling all over the U.S. and working with a lot of amazing teams and things. And I realized pretty quickly, like, for me, the real estate was just a vehicle. Like, real estate doesn't excite me. It's all right. It's just a vehicle to get. What I really like is I like growing businesses and I like growing people. Those are my two
Mm,
favorite things. So at that time, I was really enjoying the coaching stuff, and I was Brett and he kind of wanted to scale back the business a little bit. And I'm somebody I want to grow things bigger and better. That's just kind of my personality. And so we kind of realized it was at that time it might be good for us to kind of split ways, and we did that. We're still on great terms and still really good friends and stuff. And at that same time, CG, which Brett and I had been a member of the Collective Genius for, I think, 6 years at that point, and made a lot of really good connections. At that time, actually, I started facilitating some of their events, just helping out and doing whatever I could to serve and give back to the CG community. And they had a COO position open, so Jason Medley and I started talking, and kind of Brett, and then it ended up being me, Brett, and Jason, working on that transition and stuff together from one business to the other. But it worked out great, and I've been with CG for 2 years now, and Jason and I have an amazing relationship, and we're growing that business now and doing a lot of great things. But I'm doing what I still get to teach. I just get to teach, real estate investors now, so it's kind of
yeah.
exciting.
And you're the COO of CG, correct?
I am the COO. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So, all right, where do I want to start? Because I've got a couple of questions. Let's start with here, because you mentioned, like, you really enjoy being this in the second seat, the second in command. By the way, I love Cameron Harold. Have you, like, read all his books and studied all his
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
Great stuff. So we had him as a keynote speaker like 2 events ago. So one of my
Oh,
favorite ones. So
oh
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So sometimes a lot of people are in business, they're an entrepreneur. We now have a mutual connection who you recently talked to, who I introduced to the
Yeah.
family, and you talked to her recently. That's something that person said to me too. She's like, you know what? I've run businesses. I've done my own thing, but she's like, I'm really good at, and I really enjoy being in, like, second in command. And I think sometimes people start businesses and it's not going the way they wanted it to go. And I think people have a really hard time making the decision to be the second in command, because
Yeah.
you're not necessarily the face. You're not necessarily the one standing on the stage. You're not the center of attention. You're not the star of the room. And even though sometimes the COO might be more introverted like you and I are, just because we're introverts doesn't mean we don't like being like front and center or on the stage or teaching or be the face of something or grow something. So how did you, and maybe you didn't even have to do this, Brian, like, did you have to do any reconciliation to be okay with being the COO and being the second in command? And the reason I'm asking is because I think there are a number of entrepreneurs where that seat is actually better for them. And it's hard to transition from, I'm trying to grow my own business, but wait, I'm actually better suited for this over here.
Yeah. I think it's a big thing with that. Definitely it's a big thing for me, and I think a lot of other people do it. Pride. It's pride gets in the way sometimes, like, oh man, I want to be recognized. I want to be affirmed for what I'm doing, or I like to be featured, and that creeps up every now and then. But the reality is, it's I'm above all else, I'm a team player. Like I want to be a part of the team more than anything else. And that's
Mm.
one thing too, is like, our world too, when we're hiring people, it's kind of tough of you get some people that want maybe have that entrepreneurial spirit, then they want to, that's not the hire I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of a team member, somebody that wants to be a part of the team and stuff like that. But that's what I realized for me is just like whatever the team needs is what I'm going to do. And there's still, even though I'm maybe the second in command, I'm still leading I'm leading the team. I'm still out in the forefront and leading the initiatives and the strategies and the team and doing a lot of that stuff. And even though I'm not, maybe my name isn't behind it, but the name, no name is behind our business anyway. Like it's the
Mhm.
community is what makes CG work more than anything else. It's the same thing with family. Like the community is what makes family works. Matt's out there and Matt's doing stuff, or you're doing stuff, or Steve's doing stuff, but it's not one name behind it anyway. So it's the community that works. So I approach business the same way. It's like I don't want it to be just about me, and that's cool and stuff, but really it's about if the team's working together, if the community is working together, you're going to be able to grow it as big as possible. So
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think that teaching, and even like going through the principal program and going through that fellowship program as well, like, how do you think that that career set you up for the success that you're having now as a COO? Like, do you think that some of your skill set came from that? Do you think that the way your personality is wired, you're just really good at those things? Like, how do those two worlds kind of work together? Because you're an extremely successful COO.
um, I do okay. I do okay with it. No,
You're
no,
really good
I
at it.
enjoy it
You
and
just
stuff,
do
but
okay.
so I will say that like I'm somebody that like because I'm a big fan of like the personality test, like the predictive index and things like that. So not necessarily to put people in a box, but because it tells you kind of like how good somebody's going to do something for how long they can do it. So because it fits their natural state a little bit better. So example for me, like if you were looking at my PI, like I'm somebody you should not hire for an operator role or for an operations role because it doesn't
Really?
necessarily fit I'm more of like so my PI is a promoter,
Is
so
it?
it is. So even though I'm introverted and stuff like that, I like to be on stage. I like to do things like that, and that's good. But like as far as like the details and the operation, like that's not my natural state. Now being a
Okay.
teacher, I had to be super organized and I had to be very
Yeah.
communicative. And so there's so many transferable skills that I had as a teacher that I grew and developed and perfected that helped me become, the COO that I am and helps me in that role 100%. So I will say too, like the first time I ever did a presentation at CG was based on basically what made me good as a teacher is the same thing that makes me good in business. It's the same principles. It's think about it. If you're
Like
leading,
what? Like what are some of those principles?
yeah, same thing as
Because
like if
I
you're,
feel the same
yeah,
way. Like I think I would probably say the same thing you're about to say.
yeah. Well, the biggest thing is like when you're leading a team and you're leading people, like the way you communicate with them, it's literally needs to be the same way you're communicating with a fifth grader or a sixth grader or whatever it is, or a child. It's because you got to talk to them at their level. You got to make sure that it's they understand it. When you're training somebody, I feel like a lot of things that people maybe the reason they struggle with maybe managing people or keeping team members for, long term and things like that is because they weren't onboarded or trained correctly. Well, the training philosophy is the same thing as teaching it. Well, I'm going to teach it to you. We're going to do it together, and then you're going to teach it to me. So I make sure you know how to do it. It's the same thing when I'm
Mhm.
training somebody. I'm using that same principle with that and everything. So Yeah, there's a handful of things like that. Exactly. Just like, hey, the more I feel like we just did our annual planning last week. It's not necessarily my plan or Jason's plan. The more, if we're talking more in that meeting, it's probably not going to be very effective for our team. The more our team talks, the more they're getting out of it, the more we understand of what we need to work on together too. So it's like kind of back and forth. Same thing as teaching. The more that I talked in the classroom, it's probably one of my best teaching days. The more the students talked, it was the best, it was the best teaching days because they were teaching each
Mhm.
other, they were working with each other.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the biggest principles, and I think what made me probably when I realized this as a teacher, it kind of turned things around. It's the same thing in business as well, is that some of my best teaching days are when I just walked around and I just asked why. So
Mhm.
literally, maybe a student was working on a math problem, and they'd be like, as students, they'll be like, "Is this right?" They'd ask me if I was the answer right. I'm like, you tell me, or I don't know, why did you get that? And just it made them explain, as long as they could understand why things are happening or why they're doing certain things on a math problem, then they got it. They weren't just
Mhm.
regurgitating what I told them to do or the way that I told them. They had to understand the why behind why they were doing things a certain way. It's the same thing in
Mhm.
business. My team members, I want to make sure that we don't, it's not, hey, we're just going to do things because this is the way we've always done them. Hey, we're going to do things. This is why we're doing things this way. And if they
Mhm.
don't understand that, then we probably need to fix it or change it.
Yeah. Why do you think that so many visionary entrepreneurs struggle when they get to the point of growth in their business where they're ready to start building the team? And let's say they do have a couple of team members, maybe they have some contractors, they're let's say like super high six figures, low seven figures, right? Like that's such a messy part of business because they are having to hire, they're having to lead team for the first time. It's not just them and a VA. Why do you think that so many visionary entrepreneurs struggle with the team aspect? Because I mean, you and I both have been behind the scenes of businesses and seen, and I'm telling you, it is the number one thorn in people's side. It's team. And when you unpack it and you really look at what's going on, I'm just going to be honest. The biggest problem is typically leadership. It's not necessarily you have the wrong people or blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, maybe sometimes. But oftentimes, if you audit and you talk to all the team members and you talk to the business and you just look at it from an observer's non emotional perspective, oftentimes it is a leadership issue. But why do you think that is?
I think it's mainly because a lot of the people that are, especially in our world, the entrepreneurs that we're working with, what they are is they're hustlers. They were a hustler at one point. They figured out how to make some money, and they got that entrepreneurial itch, and all of a sudden they grew that, and now they have a business. But they never been trained. They never went to business school. They've never been trained in how to run a business or things. Actually, Cameron Harold, I was at a meeting one time and heard Cameron Harold say this of he had everybody in the room. There were about 200 people in the room, and he basically just asked the question, you guys are all running businesses, you guys are all entrepreneurs. Raise your or stand up if you had ever been through hiring training. If you ever had any hiring training, stand up. Four people out of the 200 stood up, but they're all running
Yeah.
teams. They all hired people. They all hired them, but nobody's been trained on how to actually do that.
Right.
Because you just get in that point where you're still in that hustle mode because you're growing your team and you're growing your business and you're making money. You're still hustling. It's a different hustle now. But leadership is tough. I mean, it's the reason that there's every an NFL coach just got fired the other day just because leading a team of people is tough to do. And it's the same thing in business. It's when you're so used to doing things on your own, but then hiring people and training them up and making them happy and showing them that career path and what they working together and stuff. It's a tough gig. And it's something you always have to be working on. I think I fell into this category of growing up. I was always I was captain of my sports teams. I was president of my class in high school. I was president of my fraternity in college and stuff like that. And I was a born leader. I hate that statement because the reality is like like leadership is a skill. Like you have to develop it over and over and over and continue to work on that leadership, reading books and putting yourselves in organizations when you hear people like Cameron Harold or John Maxwell and things like that to be able to continue to develop that leadership skill. But it's a tough
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah. What are some of the like most important leadership skills that entrepreneurs should be building?
It's a good question. Man, you're just rapid fire with these. These are great questions and stuff, making me
I'm
think over
just
here, Megan.
coming up
So,
off the top of my head based on what you're saying.
yeah, no, it's good. I think the biggest one, leadership skills. It's really number one. I think they need to learn how to lead themselves, number one. They need
What
to
does that mean?
understand. So going back to, example of that, we'll just take that same entrepreneur that, hey, they were a hustler, they learned how to make some money, they have a growing business and stuff like that, but they don't know what it actually means to be as a CEO or the visionary or whatever you want to call it. That, like, what should you actually be doing? Like, what should your day look like? Do you have a job? Like, how many businesses have you worked with, Megan, that the CEO actually has a job description for their job? Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah. So, but the person they're hiring has a job description. They know what they're doing and stuff. But the reality is, a lot of times that CEO is going to drop back into that, or jump back into that job and help out and stuff. So I think it's one of those things of, they need to learn how to lead themselves. And then when it comes to understanding that when it's okay to allow people to make mistakes, another teaching lesson right there of, like, my students, like, it's okay to let them get a question wrong every now and then. It's like, they should, if
Yeah.
they're getting 100% on every single question, they're not being challenged enough. They're not learning anything. They're just, it's too easy for them. So it's same thing in business. You got to be okay with your team members kind of making mistakes every now and then and stuff. So, lead themselves. And then just, when it comes to leading other people, learn how to train, learning how to, same thing with some of the people that are working with me working for us on our team right now. Some of them are starting to have some direct reports, even if they're virtual assistants and things. But even teaching little skills of, like, the same thing as, like, hey, teach them how to do it and then do it together, then have them teach you. A lot of times people are just like, hey, I'm recording a Loom, and it's in this bucket over here. You can watch it. Watch this recording, and it's good to go.
Yeah.
That's not training. That's a
No.
refresher video that they can go back to if they need it. But the reality is, I'm going to teach them how to do it. Maybe it's through Zoom or something like that. That's fine, but I'm going to teach them how to do it. And then we're going to talk about it, do it together. And then they have to teach me, have them record that Loom back to me. That way I can watch and make sure they know how to do it correctly. But then the Loom that's in their file that they can go watch someday as a refresher, it's their Loom. It's them explaining it themselves, but I know they know how to do it at that point.
About how long, when you're training a new team member, about how long does that training process last?
I usually like to look at it this way. If I can, and every rule is a little bit different, but we'll say generalities right here. Within 3 months, I would like them to be 80% as good as me, with the hopes and then with the impression that in 6 months they can be better than me at that job.
Mm, I
So
love that.
that's what I'm looking. I'm always looking for people. I want to hire people that eventually can be better than me at that
Yeah.
thing, whatever it is. But my goal is to train them up to be, within 3 months, be 80% as good as me, and then hopefully they can take it over and put their own spin on it, be better than me, and make it, basically take it to the next level.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear, probably the most common thing that I hear and that I see from business owners who are, more beginning stage of starting to build a team and lead a team. And again, that's usually like, you're going to start to do it high six figures. Once you cross into the seven figures, that's just a messy time of business anyway. And now you've got new leadership responsibilities and hiring and training and all the things. Two things that I hear most commonly. One is, um, here we have to go all over again. I've got to find a new person to come in and be our marketer. And now they have to learn the business all over again. And it's like this fear of, now I'm going to have to slow down. It's like it's almost like stops their heart from beating, that they're going to have to like slow down. And when you say to a business owner what you just said, 90 days, teach them, have them teach it back to you, that literally that makes the entrepreneur want to like completely bug out when they hear something like that, because they think they don't have time to do that. But then there's this unspoken expectation that I see a lot of business owners have, where it's like, well, you're the expert person who I just hired, so you should come in and you should prove to me that you know what you're doing. And I'm not going to tell you the 50 things that I expect you to be able to do proficiently in the next 2 weeks. But when you don't do it, I'm going to come back and like blame you for that. I cannot tell you how often I see that type of behavior from a business owner. What is that about? And how do we overcome? Because it creates chaos for the business owner when they think and operate that way. And it's actually probably one of the biggest problems with you not being able to grow to the next level. But here's where I think I'm most curious with what you're going to say. Most business owners do not recognize that. They do not recognize that they really are the problem, and the way that they are leading the team it's not the problem. And it's very difficult to get them to recognize that and be honest about that and even hear that type of feedback. How would you approach that conversation with a leader?
Yeah, I think one thing I like to point out to a lot of leaders is that they need to understand that they need to pay for it with one of two things. So when they hire somebody, you're paying in one of two ways. You either pay for it with time or with money. So if you want to pay a lower salary, if you want to like kind of save those, because a lot of times that's what it comes down to is the money aspect of it.
Yeah.
So they maybe want to hire somebody on a lower end salary. Well, if that's the case, that's fine. And if you want to be that's okay, but you need to pay for it more with time then. So if you want to pay that lower salary for it, then you need to make sure that you have the time to be able to put into that person. And a lot of times it's too late. A lot of times, like really you should be hiring somebody when you're at like 75, 80%. So that way you have time and capacity to train them up. But usually we're at 110%, 120%, and we
Mm.
don't have that time to train them correctly anyway. So you either pay for it with time, or in this scenario that you're kind of looking at is like, hey, well, I'm paying you the salary, you're the expert and stuff. Well, you need to make sure that they are the expert and that they know they're capable of doing what you need them to do. But before either of those situations, here's what it comes back to, Megan, is that people don't know what they need to do. Like they don't have it actually
Mm.
written down. They don't have those expectations in place. It might be a list, they might have a checklist, but what does that really entail? Do they have, hey, this is what you have to do, but here's what this really means. Here's what Jason and I like to call it the definition of done. Here's what your to do is, but here's what the definition of done. Here's what success looks like if you were doing this correctly. And then,
Hmm.
it's kind of mapping out too of just like making sure that hey, this is what you need to do, and this is what success looks like. Here's how I'm going to measure it. But then it always comes back to too is like if it's done, are you going to allow the team member to do it their way, or does it have to be done your way?
Mm.
Which usually gets a little bit tricky and stuff. So again, if I'm hiring an expert, I'm going to allow them to be the expert and do it their way. You know,
Yeah.
maybe give a
Yeah.
little bit of insight. I like to do the 10-80-10 where, hey, I'm going to give you the first 10%. You do the last, you do the next 80%. I'll come at the end and put some give you some feedback and put some finishing touches on it. But I got to be okay with this person. If I hired them to do this thing, I got to be okay with how they're going to do it.
Yeah. Can you walk us through an example of what you just said? Like maybe pick like one activity or one outcome for one person on your team where you were saying like, here's the definition of success. Here's what the outcome is. Like, here's what we're measuring. Can you just walk through an example of that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that language and what that actually means and what that looks like. I think the words we hear tossed around a lot are we don't have systems, we don't have processes, we need an SOP. But I think a lot of people don't even know what an SOP is. They don't know how to create that. You use the word checklist. I love a checklist too, but can you just pick like one example and kind of walk through what that actually looks like?
Yeah. So like one thing is so even doing, let's say let's take something that a lot of people do. Let's say like social media posting. Okay. So say we need to number one, we got to understand why we're doing social media. So why are we doing social media posting? Are we informing our members? Are we increasing our brand? Are we trying to get a certain amount of leads from it? So understanding what the outcome is from it that we want to get out of it. And then kind of looking at that, all right, what is our definition of done with that then? So, okay, here's what we want to get out of it. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we want to get out of it. Now, here's what success looks like. All right, now what are the steps that we take to get to that certain thing? Um, Now, one of the things that we do, and I'm going off on a little side note here, but one of the things we like to do with that is like, obviously we have the beginning thing and then the end thing, the definition of done. What we like to do is something we call an implementation schedule, like literally on a one-page plan. We write out, okay, if we want to accomplish this, or if success for us looks like this in March, well, okay, what has to happen in November and December and January and February to keep us on track with that? So, which a lot of people just go, oh, okay, we want to get this done by March, figure it out by March, versus talking about, hey, okay, what are the steps to get there and things like that. But so what we always like to look at is like, okay, here's what you want to do. Here's the definition of done. Here's what I would like to for that definition of done. Here's my interpretation of what success looks like for this. So I'm going to regurgitate, hey, this is what it looks like for me. This is what I'm thinking. Here's how I want it to look. Here's how I want it to feel. Here's how the copy should sound. Here's all this stuff. I'm going through all that stuff. And then I'm going to allow that person to take that next 80% and run with it because they know what it looks like. Now, that doesn't mean that next 80% is all on them and I don't have to do anything at all. I'm going to have some checkpoints with them. All right. So, hey, by next week, here's what, where do you think you can be by next week? All right. They tell me what that is. All right. Now we have a checkpoint. Now we can sit down next week. I get that feedback, or I'm kind of seeing what they are, make sure we're on the right track, not just waiting until it gets 80% down the road and then be like, oh, that's not at all what I wanted or anything like that. So have those checkpoints in place. And that last 10%, then when it gets done, when it gets to that point where it's almost finished, I can just go back in and like, hey, I like this, but change this color to this or do this thing. And then hopefully by that point, then it's like, okay, now let's implement it. Let's see how it's going and stuff. So that's how I like to look at it. But, a lot of times I think people just say, hey, here's what I wanted to do. Now go do it. So you got to make sure you give them the tools, the resources, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's too is, hey, I know that this person does it well. This person does it well. Do me a favor, like set up meetings with them, talk to them about it first, and give them some other contacts and stuff too to help them with the success as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you just used a dirty word that a lot of people don't like, and that's meetings. And I know a lot of CEOs feel like their whole job all of a sudden turns into I'm in meetings all day, every day. Or the complete opposite. I was talking to a potential client yesterday. They're doing a little under $1 million a year. They have, I think there are 5 people on their team. They're all contractors. And some of the biggest problems were balls are being dropped with processes and systems, which is impacting client success and client satisfaction. And so I was asking the person questions like, well, how are you communicating to the team member? Blah, 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 blah. And then one of my questions was, how often do you have a team meeting where all of you are coming together to discuss XYZ? And she's like, oh, we have a quarterly meeting and we discuss this. And I was like, all you have is a quarterly meeting. I was like, wow, we're going to have to change that. What is your position on team, like all team meetings, individual team member meetings? It sounds like you are in a lot of meetings. What's your approach to meetings in a company?
Yeah. I think it's gonna vary based off of how many team members you have, and things. But you like small teams, like everybody should always have like some type of a daily huddle in some way. If there's something to be measured, like you should probably have a daily huddle just to touch base real quick on something. And it doesn't even have to be like in person or even on Zoom. Like we used to do like Slack daily huddles of even just like check-in points and stuff. So I think should be some type of a daily huddle and then at least one type of a weekly meeting. Small team like that, 5 people, they should have a weekly meeting where it's a 90-minute meeting, 60 minutes and 90-minute meetings where they are going through any KPIs or any metrics they should be tracking, anything that they need to, any updates from just basically getting updates on projects and things like that. If you're waiting till the quarter to check in on projects, yeah, you're 100% going to drop the ball in any processes and things like that. So more than likely, if I have a team of 5 people, it could probably be 30 minutes of going through metrics and dealing with issues within those metrics of things that need to be fixed or anything that need to be, gone over within that. And then kind of 30 minutes of basically kind of new stuff of just what's going on, updates on rocks, updates on kind of what we're doing, how we're coming on projects. And then that last 30 minutes, it could probably be dedicated towards process of like, hey, we're going to take a look at this process and we're going to make sure everybody's doing it this way within this company and stuff like that. So
Yes.
I think there's meetings are needed and necessary. They have to be, there needs to be not just meet to meet. You need to be able to meet to get something out of it and know what you're gonna out of it. Always comes back to the why. Like, why are we meeting? Okay, well, here's our goal within this meeting. We need to, even if it's just like, hey, I need to get updated. I need to be in the know. All right, who needs to be in that meeting then for
Mhm.
everybody to be in the know and what's going on and stuff. So
Mm.
it's funny. You said that you when you're asking me that question, you mentioned that like meetings is the dirty word. I'm gonna up your dirty word with this. I'm gonna say that CEO is one of the dirtiest words I've heard over the last couple of years. How many people are in businesses calling themselves a CEO? They're not a CEO with a team of 5 people. And no, you're an operator. You are the operator of your business. You need to be the one that's dictating. You might be the leader, that's fine, but don't call yourself a CEO yet. You haven't earned that yet. You need to level yourself up. One of my good buddies, Jason Lewis, man, he has a great phrase. If he were to start a business tomorrow, he told me, he's like, if I were to start a business tomorrow, the one thing all I would focus on, the only thing I would go after is I would become COO of Bull. So basically, if I were to start a company, all I would do is build it to the point where I could have put a COO in place and they could be successful. I was like, that is brilliant. Everybody
Okay.
needs to think
So
like,
on that, at what point does a business owner shift into hiring a CEO? So you said, okay, nobody should be I agree with you. People should not be calling themselves a CEO because they truly are an operator. Until when? Is that like a size of a company, a certain amount of money, a certain level of scalability? But like at what point do you know that you're making that shift from I'm the business owner who is the operator to I'm going to bring someone on who could be an operator so that I can move into CEO role? And a lot of our listeners, they're building coaching businesses,
yeah.
multiple six, seven, multiple seven figures. So it's kind of across the board. So what would make sense?
So I think it's one of the, if you're leading a department, not saying that CEOs can't necessarily lead a department, but if you're in the weeds of your business, you're probably not really you can have that title, that's fine, but you're really not, your titles do matter, I guess, but you're not really at that level yet until you have somebody underneath you and then they're leading the team underneath you until you have like, actual direct reports and the direct reports underneath you have direct reports like that. That's how a business operates. That's what it is. I think a lot of people, we're talking about CEOs right here, but I think a lot of people too, they bring people on and give them the title of COO when they're not COOs. It's really just a lot of times they'll bring somebody on and with an inflated title like COO, and really, no, you really just need like an executive assistant, or maybe you just need an operations manager. You need somebody to just handle, some of the, make sure projects are moving smoothly and working along pretty well, and your metrics are getting hit, and maybe they're managing your team and stuff as well. But I think it's tricky. This comes back to what's it come back to, Megan? It comes back to the fact that like none of us were trained on any of this. We
No.
just hear things of like, oh man, Megan, yeah, Megan's the CEO of a business and she does this. So I'm gonna just do the same. I'm just gonna take all the stuff she does and I'm gonna do it for myself. And that might
Yeah.
not work for everybody's business. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So there's something that I've been really looking forward to this conversation. We haven't even gotten to one of the conversations that I want to have. So we're going to have to like keep this quick. But
all right.
one of the things that I am very interested in hearing from you about, because here at Structured Freedom, we talk a lot about community building from two different perspectives. One perspective is your free community, whether that's a Facebook group or wherever you're gathering people together to give value, call them your leads who then convert into clients. So that's a community. Then there's also your community inside your clientele, right? You guys have CG, Mastermind. I think there's over 400 members in that. You guys have been in existence for 14 years. You have people who probably been there for 14 years, clients who've been there that long, but your clients aren't just coming, buying for the year and then leaving. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, what is happening inside of CG and what happens inside of masterminds and coaching programs and communities that really are creating loyalty to the point where those members are becoming advocates, bringing people in to your business. Like what's happening in CG that's creating that? Because a lot of people that is in a building this community that develops loyalty and advocacy, it's elusive to a lot of people, and they're just playing the lead gen and the marketing ad spend game just to get more people in, more people in, more people in. So talk about the power of community.
You mentioned the word. That's what it is. It's community. We're put in this mastermind box, but we don't refer to ourselves as a mastermind. We refer to ourselves as a community. That's what makes it.
Okay.
It's the community that makes it work and stuff. So what brings people in and allows people to stay? It's the personal connection that comes with that community. So it's making sure that, yes, we do main stage presentations and we have keynotes and things like that, but that's not the reason that people stay. It's not, nobody's going to join CG and stay in CG because we're having some particular keynote. They're going to join CG and stay in CG because they're going to, at every event or every weekly meeting or wherever it is, they're going to get some type of personal connection that can help them in their business right now. So now, part of that coming into, and it's one of our qualifiers, like you have to be understanding that you have to be vulnerable if you come into CG. You're not coming in to pound your chest and talk about how great you are and how many deals you're doing, anything like that. You got to come in and basically say like, man, I really stink at hiring. I need help hiring right now because I'm really not good at it. I need somebody to help me out with that. But at the same time too, I'm really good at marketing. I can help somebody in marketing. So if somebody helps me in operations, I'll help somebody else in marketing. And that's what makes the community work. That's why people are going to stay, because they're making, personal connections, lifelong connections that a lot of times we say too, if you get in a pinch and you have five people that you can call, usually one of those five people, they're probably in CG. Like they met them in CG and they've been a part of that community, and they've developed not just a business relationship with them, but a personal relationship as well. So, it's being vulnerable with yourself, allowing other people to be vulnerable, getting those personal connections, and actually forming a community, making it a community, not just standing up on stage and spitting fire with some great content or anything. It's about building that community and the connection that comes along with it.
How is that communicated when new members join CG? And then I'm sure it's not just communicated with them like the day that they join. It sounds like that is culture, and that's an expectation. And I would presume that that's something that's communicated with them all throughout their membership all the time. So, how is that set up out of the gate? And the reason why I'm asking that question is because, sometimes I do consult people on things like onboarding and client retention and building community inside of their programs such that people stay longer and they're going to bring more people in. And I'll ask questions like, how are you establishing community out of the gate? Oh, well, I mention it on the group onboarding call. And I'm like, is that so my clients know? And I'm like, is that the only time you're mentioning it? So what has CG developed and what's going into that from the leadership team such that people know this is the culture here. This is the way that we operate. This is the expectation here. And then how is that communicated ongoing?
Yeah, I think it starts from leadership down, with from not me and me being included in that, but from before me. Like that's how it's always been. Like our number one core value in our community is that you have to be a go-giver. So that is that you can't hold back. You got to be able to give as well as receive. People that come in that are like takers, like they're not going to be asked to renew. They're going to be asked to, move on out, and we're okay with that. And we'll lose some members because of that, and that's okay. But you have to be a go giver within that community. And that's the way it's kind of. I would say that there's been a shift with CG, and I've always appreciated CG and have done a great job. But I feel like when I first came in, it was a little bit more chest pounding and people kind of measured up by how many deals they were doing. Like, I think it's the biggest compliment I get now when people come in. And she's like, I can't believe like he just told me how to do this within my business and stuff. Like competitors even, and like people that are in the same markets and stuff. Like people are just helping each other, and that's what it's all about. But I think it starts with, like you said, it starts with number one, even before the onboarding. It starts with the consult that they do before that, but even on the application, they're being asked on the application, like, what do they need help with right now in their business? And then what's working well within their business? That's the one thing that I always want to know. And our sales team, they're digging in on the consults of like, not just talking about, oh, here's what we do and here's how we do it. It's about them. It's a business consultation. It's not a sales pitch. We're going to sell them.
Mhm.
Like hey, we're going to make sure we're a fit. We're going to offer them to join CG and send them an agreement, but it's not a sales pitch. It's an actual business consult. We want to know what you're going through at this time within your business, what you need a lot of help with. And at the same time too, know what are you doing really well, so you can kind of help somebody else out as well. So we want to be able to help you, but we want to make sure that you're willing and able to help somebody else as well, because that's how we know you're a good culture fit. And then again, coming into the onboarding call, it's kind of established from the beginning. I want to know, hey, you know, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then tell me about your business, and then tell me about, okay, what are you doing really well and what do you need help with right now? But then they walk into that onboarding call with their first connection. Like that's one of the first, like,
Mhm.
what do you need help with right now? They get their first connection. And sometimes it's just, hey, it's watch this training first and then get back to me, because I want you need to watch this first before you go talk to some other
Yeah.
people and stuff like that. But that's what we focus on, is what connection do you need, and what connection can we make for you to help somebody else out as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Cool. Well, we've been here for almost an hour and I still could ask you 22 questions, but we're going to have to close it down. So, uh, at the time of this recording, it's the end of 2024. We're heading into 2025. What would be like your best sage advice to business owners who are building, growing, scaling? Um, what advice would you give us heading into 2025?
I think that this is a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but because I just got brought up in a call last week, and so I think it's worth saying again and things. But a lot of people when they come up, everybody talks about, oh, hey, you got to have your come up with your long-term goal and then kind of work it backwards and stuff like that. Is I know people at this point, if you number one, if you don't have your annual planning session scheduled, make sure it's on your calendar and scheduled. Don't wait till the end of December. Don't wait till January. Get your annual planning done now. But as you're doing that annual plan, if you're looking at what your goals are for next year in 2025, a lot of people always go through that philosophy of like, well, here's what I want to make, or here's how much I want to grow. And then I just work it backwards and divide it by four or whatever. Like, I like to say is like, don't let your numbers dictate your plan. Let your
Mm,
plan dictate your numbers.
okay.
Go ahead and figure out what you want to do and figure out what you want those numbers to look like. But then come up with okay, what's the plan that you're going to do to implement to get to those numbers? And then make sure you can actually do that at the long, on a schedule that makes sense, that's realistic, that you have capacity for and stuff like that. And then see if like as you pull out that plan with the numbers that come from it, like make sure that actually does that still fit your numbers? Does your plan support the growth that you actually want and can it happen? So yeah, I'd say just don't let your numbers dictate your plan. Let your plan dictate your numbers.
I love that. That's awesome because that's not typically what people would say about goal setting and planning for the year.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Good stuff, Brian. Well, thank you so much. This has been so rich. The entire time I've been listening to you, I'm like, I have to go back and re-listen to this recording myself because there were so many golden nuggets. I wasn't able to sit here and take a bunch of notes, but I feel like I could have taken 10 pages of notes. But you gave so many crystal clear nuggets. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to go implement that way, or I'm going to help my client with this over here. So that was just really incredible. Thank you so much for your generosity and all that value.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, until next time, everyone, remember to build a business and life that is built to last.